Jeremy Willis is Head of Procurement at professional services firm PricewaterhouseCoopers. I started off by asking him to tell us a little bit more about his function.
PricewaterhouseCoopers has a relatively mature internal procurement function, a cross-category organisation across the key areas of human capital, IT, FM, business services, marketing. But of course, being a consultancy organisation as well, we have a robust consulting practice too. So, and increasingly we find that we're working more closely between the two organisations. So the consulting organisation is approaching my internal team to talk about some of the deep expertise that we have in our commodity areas and buying and services to support the running of PwC, and vice versa. If we're looking for broader industry knowledge, then we would approach our consulting colleagues and share knowledge in that respect. So part of the benefit in that organisation is that we get the client-facing and the internal teams working more closely together.
What's the secret to that? How do you get those two? Because I suppose they have slightly different agendas, if you like.
Initially, very different agendas, but the secret is knowledge sharing, building relationships. Basically, reciprocity is the key, isn't it? So, delivering value to either side, gaining trust, showing that you can, you've got some expertise and knowledge that you can share, but doing so in an open and transparent way, and being available and accessible. Of course, bandwidth is an issue for both parts. The internal function has been resource constrained over the last 12-18 months, but it's striking the right balance.
As you mentioned, I mean, I can understand the sort of resource constraints of the recent months, but maybe you could tell us some of the highlights that your internal team have been involved in.
Yes, well, the real joy of the last 18 months is, of course, it's been a cost management agenda, and we've managed to, in respective years, take 8% and another 8% out of our quite substantial cost base over the last 2 fiscal periods, which has been excellent. Of course, in this cost management agenda, it's brought us much closer to the business, so we've moved a step closer to the executive board. The procurement function, as most professionals would tell you, was closer now to business strategy than it's ever been. So there have been many highlights in that respect, but the challenge is, of course, in the next 12 or 18 months, making sure that we retain that control and build on what we've achieved to date.
So supposedly in the last 6 months or so we've been coming out of recession. What sort of trends have you noticed?
I think the trends that spring to mind are in some areas where there was a softer market and you could track the cost reduction, then we enjoyed that, and that was fine, and we had open and honest dialogue with our key suppliers. But in other areas, actually, you have to move away from this "I'll have the same for less" ethos and understand those things that are of value to your organisation and the cost elements of the services that are being provided by your key suppliers. And when you can have that honest dialogue and unpack, if you will, the various components and right size, build the right proposition for your business so that you can take cost out but still maintain the right sort of service integrity. I think those have been key learning points for me over the last 12 or 18 months, and real highlights, I think, as part of our organisation as it matures.
Absolutely. I suppose you touched on it earlier, but I'd like to come back to the idea of procurement, sort of how it fits in with the rest of the business. And I wonder how at PwC, how does that work? How do you align yourself with the rest of the business?
Indeed. Procurement at PwC is a finance function. It moved from another part of the business about 18 months ago, and we found that invaluable. Because, as you know, procurement is founded on having access to the right sort of MI. It's brought us close to some of the key decision makers in the business. So that's been very helpful from our perspective, being closer to Treasury, being closer to tax. But also how it works well within the business is that actually you've got to strike the right balance and have a cross-stakeholder engagement team. So it's not just procurement or finance, tax, Treasury. You're bringing in OGC, your legal people, you're working well with the service functions, you're working appropriately with risk management. And it's this balance, striking the right roles and responsibilities within the organisation, which is key. And knowing that you can only achieve success if you're working in harmony.
I mean, that makes perfect sense. On the other hand, is there any areas of improvement? Are there any sort of areas where perhaps there are attention you could be looking to improve on?
There are areas of improvement with any organisation, and I think generally within a procurement function, the last 12 months have seen a lot of tactical activity focused on cost reduction, which is fine. But a generally mature, robust organisation has a broader skill set. So commercial acumen is an area that I think differentiates the higher performing procurement functions from the less performing ones. But the real ability to develop appropriate relationships, to be able to communicate with impact and empathy, honesty and transparency and trust, all these things, if you haven't got those skills, you're not going to be as effective as a procurement function. And I think as we move forward, we've got to ensure that our people are not only very strongly technically competent, but they've got those robust soft skills as well.
And how do you go about that? We often hear it's very difficult to get the right mix of skills, and you mentioned commercial acumen. Where do you start looking for those?
It's interesting. It's a very good question, Steve, because I think we've historically recruited the wrong people, because you recruit around technical competence, and actually I think you can build those skills. But if you haven't inherently got good communication, relationship skills, then you will always be inhibited. So I prefer to find someone that's articulate, that can communicate well, has a proven history of building relationships, working well with people. And then you can add the procurement technical skill set around that. Commercial acumen, I think, is becoming more important. Previously, probably less so, but now I think this well-rounded sense of commerciality, of business acumen, being able to draw together the strategic imperatives of the business with the procurement strategy is key, and those are the sorts of skills that we should be focusing on.
And is there a degree to which you can look to the rest of the business for opportunities to draw people into procurement?
Oh, very much so. So I mentioned earlier that we work well with our consulting colleagues, but actually it's PwC in and of itself is very good at knowledge sharing. There's a real appetite to share business strategy, our approach, the way we work with our clients, all those things that can build commerciality more broadly across the business. And I think we work well with each other, and this knowledge sharing is key to that.
I suppose finally I'd like to hear a little bit about the structure side of things. I mean, maybe you could explain to me how your group is structured and maybe why that's the case.
Indeed. So procurement and PwC structured along category lines. I say category, of course there are some areas where the commodity that you're sourcing straddles a couple of categories. So we've tried to bring some flexibility, but predominantly we've set ourselves up to be aligned to the shared services capability within the business. So I mentioned human capital, IT, facilities management, business services in our marketing and communications community. And we align our procurement categories along those lines. But then we try and bring a matrix in between, so areas that straddle those, such as perhaps venues, where you get some business services activity and some marketing activity, then we have more of a matrix engagement. So that's how our team's structured. So my reporting line is through finance and into the CFO, and that's important for us. We work well within that finance community. My firm belief is that procurement is a commercial function, and so I think that's important. But then having that sponsorship, so that our CFO is a board member within the firm, my boss reports directly into him, and we have a very immediate sense of executive sponsorship that sort of permeates through our function and enables us to engage more robustly and appropriately with other parts of the business.
You mentioned that relationship to finance. I guess that's where I'd like to end on, because obviously your function is very close, as you said, to finance. But that, on the other hand, a lot of the people we talk to, we hear that actually that can be an extremely difficult relationship. And I suppose just finally, I wonder what's the key to making sure that finance and procurement sort of see eye to eye?
It comes back to relationships, doesn't it, Steve? And I think understanding what your role is. So I'm not a finance expert, I'm a procurement expert, and that's the value that I bring to my organisation. And finance has its own roles and responsibilities. And I think it's a case of saying, what are you bringing to the table? Now let's make sure that whatever I'm doing helps support what you're doing, finance function. These are the things I need from you to be able to deliver value back to the business as a procurement leader. And I think once you've established those rules of engagement, if you will, making sure that you're respectful of each, and actually that you're sharing the successes together, because we can't succeed without working as a team, and I think that's important, so that actually it's always a team effort, and the other parts of the business that you work with outside of finance as well. that there's the sense that you're all pulling in the same direction and that everyone's bringing something different to the table and you know the right balance.
Absolutely, you make it sound simple. Jeremy, thank you very much.
Thanks, Steve.